It's been a little quiet here, Rube.
What was that?
A little quiet.
Yeah, we were just kind of waiting for the other shoe to. I mean, it's not shocking that they're not super active, but I did expect a little more. Both the Eagles making moves and some of their free agents making moves. So it has been a couple little nuggets, but overall, it's Howie's always going to be a guy that kind of waits for that second wave and for the prices to go down. But we're there. We're in that second wave now. So it'll be interesting to see if things heat up with the Eagles or if they're just content to look. They got all these draft picks. Maybe they like some of their younger guys or backups better than we do. But yeah, they have. And look, I'm always the first guy to say, you just wait and see. This isn't the time to be critical of an offseason. We're sitting here in March, and there's plenty of time. There's plenty of moves to make, trades. Guys are going to be released. There's going to be moves in the summer. But I did expect a little bit more at this point.
This is the Eagle Eye Podcast with Reuben Frank. I'm Dave Zangaro.
Was that too long? Was my introductory comment too long? I'm sorry. I always do
that. We're going to get into a lot today. We want to talk about the Deshaun Watson trade and the Eagles not getting him and what it means for the franchise. We'll talk about the Eagles free agents. You mentioned it. They're guys from 2021 that are still on the market. We'll kind of look at some positions of need where the Eagles could still add, but we want to recap what they have done. I mean, not a ton of moves. We already talked about Hassan Reddick quite a bit, so I don't think we need to get into that today, but they did sign a 6-time Pro Bowler.
Yeah, people got pissed at me when I tweeted that Fletcher Cox was the first 6-time Pro Bowler Eagles have added in free agency since James Lofton. He was already here. I don't know that. I didn't cover him for the last 10 years. It was a joke. I was being funny. I was trying to be funny. But, yeah, and, I think after the initial shock of whoa, they cut Fletcher, it became pretty apparent pretty quickly that this was the plan. They just couldn't agree to a new contract before that $18 million bonus was due. So it's got to be a little humbling if you're Fletcher Cox to get released. The guy's a borderline Hall of Famer. If not, he's certainly going to be in the conversation. But $14 million one-year salary is a pretty nice consolation prize.
Yeah, and it's a weird deal. You're right. It was pretty obvious that they thought they were going to bring him back. I mean, they released one of their all-time great players, and it was a single line, "We've released Fletcher Cox." So it kind of told you that they expected to bring him back, but it's a gamble, right? I mean, theoretically, another team could have come in and offered him, and he could have left.
Yeah.
It's not like they've done this in the last couple of years with Cravon LeBlanc and Rick Lovato. I mean, this is Fletcher Cox. This is different. I guess it worked out. They got him back. They're a better team with him than without him. But, it's kind of a weird deal. And this is probably going to be his last year here, you would think.
Yeah. Unless if he plays a lot better than he did. And, second year in Gannon's system, there's a chance that could happen. I don't think it's a very big chance. I think he kind of is what he is at this point in his career. He's a little bit above average defensive tackle. That's what he is. And there's no shame in that. I mean, he's had a great run, but he's not the player he was. It's a lot of money for a little bit above average defensive tackle, which tells you how important they thought it was to have him here. I think a lot of people would have understood if they did cut ties with him and let him go. And I wonder if deep down the Eagles were hoping somebody would offer him more money and they would kind of all right, well, we tried. And, so I'm not surprised. I mean, teams just aren't going to pay a fortune for a 31-year-old declining veteran who's, like you said the other day on our last podcast, he's played a lot of football over the last 10 years. He usually plays 14, 15 games, 16 games a year. Over a decade, it's a lot of reps, 50, 60 reps a game. So I don't know how much there is left. It's a lot of money for what he gives you. But look, this organization's been been blasted so many times for getting rid of guys, all-time Eagles too soon. Maybe we're going to have to criticize them for getting rid of one, not soon enough.
Yeah, I mean, Howie's warned against sentimentality before. But in this case, look, they're still a better team with him than they are without him. So I guess you say, all right, whatever. But in general, Rube, the idea that like they're going to run this back, I mean, I get why some fans are looking around like, man, they're not good enough to run it back. And I know they have the first round draft picks, and look, they're not done in free agency. They're going to make more moves. Maybe Howie's always up for a trade. So this isn't the final product. But I get some of the angst right now, looking around and saying, we're going to run that team back.
Yeah,
a team that won 9 games in a bad division, and
if they do, I think there'll be plenty of time to criticize them in August and September if this is really the team they bring back. I just don't think that'll be the case. I tweeted something the other day about like the 2017 team. A week into free agency, they had signed Alshon, Torrey Smith, and Chance Warmack at this point. And then Chris Long came, and then Patrick Robinson came, and Corey Graham came, and then the trade for Darby was in August, and the trade for Ajayi was in October. They signed LeGarrette Blount like in June. I mean, so somebody said, well, that's just 1 year. What about another year? And I picked 2010. It was the same thing, and this has kind of been Howie's MO that there are moves. They're later, and they're not break the bank moves, especially this year. They don't have unlimited cap space, although they have more than they did. We'll talk about the Darius Slay restructure, but I'm willing to wait and see. I think there is a plan. Whether it works, I don't know, but I know they need to add a free agent wide receiver. I know they need to get better at safety. They need a cornerback. It could be Steve Nelson. They could run it back with him. They certainly have needs, and we'll get into some of those, but I don't think fans should be panicking. And they don't just have 3 first-round picks. They have 3 first-round picks, and they're good picks, top 20 picks, without giving up a 2 and a 3. Now they're the first team since 1991 to have 3 first-round picks and a 2 and a 3. 91 Cowboys did, and they have 5 of the first 83 picks. Howie's been good in the 2nd and 3rd round, so I think if they draft the way they did last year, the way they did in 18, which is a lot to ask because Howie's been inconsistent. If they do, that's potential big addition to this team. It's not just 3 first-round picks. It's a 2 and a 3. And, you think about players like Dickerson and Goddard and, Gainwell and Quez. These are later-round guys. So I'm not ready to panic yet, but I am curious to see where it goes from here.
Sure. The one guy they did bring back, Anthony Harris, I think both of us, fair to say, a little surprised by that. If you were looking at their 2 safeties and you thought, well, they're going to bring one of these guys back, either Harris or McLeod, I think both of us would have been in on Rodney. And look, they could still bring Rodney McLeod back, but it puts you in a situation where I think we looked at the safety position after the season and said, well, they've got to get better than what they were last year. And so I still think that option's on the table to bring Rodney back, but then they're not better. Then they're running it back with the same guys a year older, and all of a sudden you're like, well, that didn't accomplish anything.
Well, maybe that's why Rodney's not here. When you look at it, who's gonna give you more in 2022, Anthony Harris or Rodney? And it's probably Anthony Harris.
Do you think so?
I think they might think so. I mean, Rodney's going to be 32. He's going to be 32 or 33. We did see decline in him. I think Anthony Harris is not a real exciting player. He didn't make it. I mean, he did lead the league in interceptions a couple of years ago. He had 6, but he hasn't done a lot as far as playmaking since then. They might just think he's more solid. They might be trying to sign a safety and go with that guy and Harris. Maybe they might think that's the way to go. I think it would be a mistake to run it back with Rodney and Harris. I think if you have one of those 2 and somebody younger and who can run and cover, you're okay, but not both of them. And they might have just prioritized Harris over Rodney.
That's why I look at it, because I thought, well, you bring one of those guys back and then you sign someone to get better. And in my head, I was always thinking, Rodney was the more likely guy. You run it back with Rodney. You find one of those younger safeties, and a lot of them are gone now. We're talking about Reed and Whitehead, and I think a few of them. I think Harrison's still out there. I think Edmonds is still out there. But that was my idea: was you bring back Rodney, have some stability because he's a solid player still. The locker room stuff does matter, and then you get a younger player. So it kind of threw me for a little bit of a loop when we found out that Harris was the guy coming back. And yeah, I wouldn't have done that. I would have prioritized Rodney over him.
Say you want to sign, if you want to sign Edmonds, for instance, who you mentioned. I mean, he's more of a box safety, so maybe the thinking is, you're not going to play Rodney and Edmonds. Maybe you want to sign him. Harris is a better. I mean, Edmonds isn't a cover guy. So maybe that was the thinking. Maybe they're trying to find more of a box safety to go with Harris.
Maybe. But it doesn't seem like that's the way Gannon wants to use his safeties. They're going cover 2, and they want
maybe Gannon's comfort level with Anthony Harris was a factor.
And that is the one thing that makes the most sense to me is he's had Harris before. Harris has played in a system very comparable to what Gannon wants to run. And maybe there was just, hey, he gets it more than anyone else, and we want him back. I didn't see anything from him last year that would make you want him back, honestly. I thought Marcus Epps outplayed him for a lot of the year.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I mean, Epps is under contract. He's here. I mean, could they be thinking Epps and Harris as the starters? I think that's a mistake.
Yeah, and I like Epps. He forced their hand last year to play him more. They ended up going to a rotation, partially because he was playing too good to overlook, but that can't be the answer.
I don't think so. I think he's a nice rotational piece. I think Harris is a guy who, I mean, he's the definition of mediocre. I mean, he's not going to go out and embarrass himself, but he's not going to really make plays to help you win. He's just going to be out there. There's games you don't even notice Anthony Harris from start to finish. Maybe that's not a terrible thing, but I think there's still at least one major safety away.
And you're right. I mean, you mentioned the draft earlier. It could come in the form of a draft pick. It seems unlikely in the first round, unless Kyle Hamilton slips a little bit there. But second round, there are guys in that range. Third round, there'll be players in that range that would fit, that would kind of be the right value. So maybe that's what they're thinking. But you also can't just think that way. You know what I mean? You can't just think we'll get one in the second round, because if it doesn't fall that way, then you're left without a solid starter.
Kayvon.
Look, I've always really liked Kayvon, but nothing I've seen from him suggests that he could do that.
Agree. Yeah.
And, I was really high on Kayvon when they drafted him, and he's dealt with some injuries and, unfortunately, like bad timed injuries that he was about to have a chance, and then he gets hurt. But you don't know what he is. Can't rely on him.
Yeah, I agree. No flashes here and there, but we know he can run a little. But I mean, if they're planning on using this group, what they have now in Kayvon and Epps and Harris, and kind of cobbling it together with maybe a third round pick, it's not good enough.
Yeah. All right, let's look at some of the other things they've done. They had 4 restricted free agents, so I figured we'd lump them together. I think we talked about Greg Ward already. He's back on a cheaper deal. We don't know exactly what it is, but they weren't going to tender him. That was a crazy amount. And there's not even a guarantee he's with the team this year. I can't imagine there's much guaranteed money on that deal. Nate Herbig, they tendered at $2.43 million. So presumably he'll be back unless another team really wants to offer him a lot of money, which is hard to imagine. So he'll be back as a backup. And then Alex Singleton leaves for Denver, a 1-year deal out there. And Boston Scott comes back here on a cheaper 1-year deal.
Yeah, and good luck to Alex. I think Alex is a guy that everybody roots for, and everybody appreciates his journey. He had a couple stints in training camps and practice squads, and ended up in Canada and came down here, practice squad, cut a couple times, and ended up playing a lot the last couple of years, and he's a guy that's going to give you everything he has. It's just not that much. He's just not that good. He's limited what he can do. I don't think anybody would root against him, but I think they have to get better at linebacker, and that's why he's not here. And I know he was second in the league in tackles or whatever, and that's great. But they have to get better. And one of the reasons he had so many tackles is they were like 7 yards down the field. So I don't want to say anything bad about Alex Singleton. They just have to get better there. And I think it's an encouraging sign that at least at that position, they're acknowledging that, we can't line up the same group of linebackers as we did last year. We understand that. We know that we have to get better.
But they haven't done it yet. So, if they started the season tomorrow, which they don't, you'd have TJ Edwards, Davion Taylor, and I guess you can say they'd start Reddick at Sam. But
yeah,
that's not great.
No, they need another linebacker as well. And that's right. It's the exact same issue with safety. And I'm fine with Edwards. I think I think he probably played a little too many snaps last year. I think there's, some maybe be more of a sub package guy than an every down guy, but out there on running downs, I think he's really solid, and he's gotten better in coverage. They're just one guy short. It's the same as safety. I'm okay with who they brought back. I guess in that comparison, Singleton is McLeod, and TJ Edwards is Anthony Harris, and Davion Taylor is Kayvon. It's like the same situation where, okay, there's some people there, but they have to get better.
I wish Taylor didn't get hurt last year. Then he would have he would have started the whole season after getting back in the lineup. And once he got hurt, now you're stuck in this position where you don't know what he is.
Yeah. And I
think you have a better idea right now.
He's such a different kind of player than Singleton. They're opposite types of players. Yeah, we don't know. Again, I guess there's a chance he could be that guy, but we just haven't seen it. And it's the same with Kayvon. They came out in the same draft a round apart. It's tough to rely on those guys because we just haven't seen it.
Yeah, with Davion last year, there were some moments. And the thing that encouraged me about him was he was getting better. Like almost weekly. Like he was getting better the more he played. And you're thinking, all right, like you're going to get to see this guy for an extended period of time and really have an idea about just how good he is and how good he can be. And then he's hurt again. So it's a tough deal. And he's gotten hurt quite a bit.
Yeah.
That's another part of him to kind of wonder and worry about is, can this guy even stay healthy at this point?
Yeah. He's a smaller guy and he's out there and, he physically gives it everything he has, and it's a concern. And, he'll really flash at training camp, but got to get through the season. Yeah.
What'd you make of Boston Scott coming back?
Well, as everyone knows, I'm a big Boston Scott fan, and I was relieved. It would have been a really rough year for me if Boston wasn't here. He's the bodyguard too, so got to keep him around. No, he's a good player. He's got such a unique player. Has a real nose for the end zone. His touchdowns per touch is like among the highest in NFL history. He finds the end zone. He gets, he's got that low center of gravity. He's got great balance and vision. He's not an elite player, but he's a guy that really helps his team, makes big plays when he gets opportunities. And he had the only touchdown in the playoff game, didn't he? The loss to Tampa. He had one touch and scored a touchdown. That's Boston Scott. Jacking up that touchdown per touch average in garbage time. But I would have tendered him. They got away with not doing it and saved $1 million or what it was, a little less than that. And I'm glad he's here. I think he's a good player.
Yeah, I was with them in not tendering him. To me, he's a player you want to have, but you really can't overpay.
That's fair. And it paid off. They didn't lose him. And, I didn't think anyone was going to – I know he loves being here. So yeah, it did work out. But if it was
I wonder
me,
if
I
the
would
Giants were about to call.
just keep him on the inactive list, just
Yeah.
so he doesn't have to play against them.
Well, I mean, they could use a running back too up
Yeah,
there.
that's true. Well, are they going to keep
So
Saquon? I keep waiting
I
for
don't I
keep
don't know
waiting for
about
them
that.
to have with Saquon, but
Yeah.
yeah, he's good. I mean, he's a good little player. I like him. He's easy to root for.
Yeah, he is. The only guys who have signed elsewhere, we mentioned Singleton and Hassan. I didn't have Hassan Ridgeway being the first former Eagle to sign elsewhere.
Yeah, yeah, that was. I thought Derek Barnett was going to get this huge deal from some team that saw his age and his traits and his his college tape, and he's certainly a guy that flashes when he makes a play. He looks really good. Just doesn't happen very often. I thought he was going to get $10 million a year in the first 36 hours of free agency.
On a lot of like the top, people put out their lists of the top free agents. He's one of the top guys available who is unsigned.
One of the top guys that's available.
That was available, I should have said.
Yeah, I'm really surprised, and I'm kind of actually like I feel vindicated almost. Like it's just like I just don't think he's that good, and I was like, somebody's going to sign this guy, and I just don't understand it. But his price is going to, obviously he's going to be coming down now because I'm really curious what he was asking. Pro Football Focus estimated $12.5 million over 3, which blew my mind. He had 2 sacks last year. He had 20 sacks and 21.5 sacks in 5 years. He was hurt one of those years, but that number's got to be coming down. Let me ask you this: if he's out there in a month and his price comes down, what do? You bring him back?
I'll tell you what, the likelihood of that increases every day he's out there.
Yeah. How low
it would be so unpopular. I wonder if they'd take that into consideration.
No.
I mean, it's not at all.
It depends what you get him for. Like,
yeah,
if you could get him for like 1 year, $4 million, would you do that?
And if he doesn't get a contract somewhere, he's probably going to want to sign a 1-year deal.
Right. Yeah, there's going to be a point where his long-term his multi-year price that he's being offered is going to be so low that it makes sense for him to take a 1-year deal, prove he can be like a 9-sack guy, and bet on himself and hit free agency again in a year and try to get that money. But what's the price where you would bring him back for a year? $3.5 million?
Yeah, I would do that.
Yeah,
would
I would
you?
too. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it would be unpopular, but he's an average player. And in this case, I'm saying average isn't bad. Like, you need average players.
Exactly.
So, and especially at a spot where they rotate, they could use them.
Yeah, I mean, he only had 2 sacks this year, but like he's averaged, I mean, in his full seasons, he's averaged, I guess, about 5, which it's still not a lot. He does get pressures. He does make his presence known. He does tend to make things uncomfortable for quarterbacks occasionally.
He hits quarterbacks both before and after the whistle, which is.
And the penalties certainly are something that if you do bring him back, I mean, that's going to be something that they're going to have to just keep trying.
They're going to have to live with it.
Or live with. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. At this point, that's not going to change.
Yeah, but yeah, I think if the price got to $4 million, I would do it. I wouldn't pay more.
And it would be like, and people don't like the kick the can stuff, but it would be a limited cap hit because they would tack on void years and they'd get him in for pretty cheap.
He might be so low you wouldn't even have to tack on void years. It wouldn't be even.
Well, they did it last year. I'm trying to think with that Anthony Harris deal.
Right.
Last year was 1 year, $4 million, and they made it a 5-year deal. So
they did.
They could use that structure.
They were a little more strapped than this year. So
that's true.
Maybe they could make it a 3-year deal. 2 voidable years. But and I know I'm going to get a message saying, what are you talking about? Signing bonuses prorate over the life of the contract. So the Eagles are in the habit of adding fake years. And when we say void, they disappear based on anything. Like if the sun rises, the year voids. So if he's on the roster or not on the roster, 2023 voids. So it automatically.
You know what the actual mechanism is to get it to void? It's normally like if this player is on the roster X amount of days before the start of the league year, like they're obviously going to be on the roster before they hit free agency.
Right.
It's just funny the way they have to put like something that obvious in a contract.
Yeah. So, but that's what I mean. It's basically the same as if the sun rises. So there's 0% chance that those contract years would ever kick in. So there's something that they've been around for a while. I think Banner, I don't know if it was Banner or Howie was the first one to start using them as a cap saving device, but
I think it was Howie. I don't think they were around for Banner.
Yeah, I think it was Howie. But there's a certain point where, I mean, that money starts adding up and, but the cap's going to, I saw an estimate where the cap's going to be, the unadjusted cap now is 208. The Eagles cap is like 220. The adjusted cap with carryover money, it's going to be like, they're saying like close to 230 and then like in the 250s in 2 years. It's going to be 300 million in a few years.
Yeah.
The way it's going up. So
I guess it's a good point to mention Darius Slay reportedly restructured, and they did the same thing. They gave him a lot of his base salary and a signing bonus, and then they kicked the can a little bit. It creates quite a bit of space. He had a high base salary. So I think sometimes when people see that, they're like, oh, they're planning a big move. Not necessarily. Sometimes these are kind of things they want to do anyway. It could be. I mean, in order to make a trade, for instance, for a player with a high salary, you would need that space. But also, if they traded for someone with a high salary, they redo that contract anyway. So
with voidable years, and exactly, but it gives them flexibility. It just gives them some breathing room in case something comes up. There could be something planned. I don't think there's any one thing that Howie's like, I got to make this money so we can do this. But it's just better to have it. And again, Slay gets the exact same amount of money.
Gets it now.
He just gets it now instead of over the next 9 months. So the amount that's converted from base salary to signing bonus in his case was the maximum amount and still be paid the minimum base salary of $1.12 million. So as you added to my story, which I appreciate. They used to be where your base salary could be below the minimum as long as your total compensation for the year was above the minimum. They changed that, and you have to have that minimum base now. So, So what did it clear up about 10 million? I don't remember the exact amount.
Around 10.
Around 10 million. So,
roughly.
Yeah. So on we go.
Yeah. The next move from that perspective is going to be Javon Hargrave, I would imagine. And he's one that they could just do the same thing, but I would extend him. I would give him a new contract with real years and make sure he's here the next, especially with it looking like this is going to be Fletcher's last year here.
Yeah, I'd be good with that. How much you thinking?
His last deal was 3 years, $39 million. You'd probably need a pay raise on that. So you're probably looking at $15 million a year.
I was thinking 16.
Yeah, 15 is conservative, but
yeah,
you're giving it to him now before he hits.
He would do that. Does it concern you at all that the second half of his season wasn't as productive?
No. I mean, he started getting doubled more, and I think that's something that a player kind of learns to deal with over time. That matters. It certainly matters because in this scenario, we're looking at it and saying you're going to extend him because Fletcher Cox isn't going to be here, so he's going to get all that attention. But I also think that they're not going to just go into the future with one defensive tackle that's really good. They value that position too much that eventually they'll either draft or sign someone to play next to him who's very good as well.
Well, what do you think Milton Williams' upside is?
Good upside. I don't know if you can rely on him being that guy yet, but the upside's there.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see how much better he is in year two. We're kind of off the script here, but it's important to be able to make off the script plays in a podcast. I'm really curious to see how much better he gets because he improved as the year went along, and there were some wow moments with him, just with his power and his athleticism and just moving people around. But yeah, I'm all for Hargrave. I would be all for giving him a deal. And he seems to like it here. So hopefully that happens. Yeah.
So when the season ended, I went through and I listed the Eagles' needs in terms of most pressing to least pressing. Most pressing, as I think a lot of people would agree, was edge rusher. So their one splash, I don't want to say they took care of it, but they got an edge rusher. Want to go through the other ones in the top five? Yeah. So the second one on here had safety, which they made a move. They re-signed Anthony Harris. I'd still put that position pretty high up. The next one was receiver. They need to do something there. The next one after that was linebacker. And then the one after that was cornerback. So all these still kind of remain that there are things they need to do here.
Yeah, and I think the wide receiver one is the most interesting to me just because, I think the fear is that they think they can get something out of Rager next year, whereas it's obvious they can't.
I think they know that.
Maybe they do. There's still some good options out there. And if they have there's certainly some receivers that are going to be available, some really good ones where they pick. So maybe their thinking is we're gonna draft a guy in the first round, and that we know they think really highly of Quez and that he can take a big step next year. I think Devontae is going to take a big step, and maybe they feel like that. And a late free agent pick, but I tell you what, I would sign somebody. I mean, they have the money to do it. I was looking at some of the guys who are available. There's still some really good options. We talked about Pascal. He's one guy I'm really intrigued by is Sammy Watkins, who is younger than I thought. He's only 28. He played in an offense last year where he just didn't get targeted. But when he got targeted, his yards per target were really high. He averaged almost 15 yards a catch. And he was just in an offense that they didn't throw. He was kind of like in this offense. They almost threw as rarely as the Eagles did. So I was surprised he was still 28. Seems like he's been around a long time. I think he's really good. And I think if he doesn't have to be a 1 or even a 2, I'd be really good with him. I don't know what kind of money he's looking for, but we're sitting here a week in, and I think he could be had.
Yeah, I don't know if he's the guy I'd go after.
Who do you like?
But there are other Keelan Cole, and there's familiarity there. Still pretty young. I think there's still some upside there too. Jarvis Landry's a name that's going to get mentioned. Probably more of a slot at this point, but he would make some sense. Zach Pascal's going to keep getting mentioned, but there are receivers out there. Huh?
Pascal's just not that good.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I mean,
but
familiar. Being familiar with each other is fine, but I'm not sure how big an upgrade he would be.
Over Rager?
Yeah, he's not. I mean, how many yards did he have last year?
If he can tie his shoes, he'll be an upgrade over Rager.
Oh man, Zach Pascal. He's 27. He had 384 yards last year. He got targeted 69 times, which is more than Quez, and it had 300 fewer yards. He's averaged about 470 yards per year in his career. I'm no thank you. I can do better than that.
Yeah, he probably can. How about like Jamison Crowder?
Yeah, I like Crowder.
That do anything for you? Still a decent player, slot guy. You'd have to move Quez outside. But like we talked about before, they like Quez enough and they can move him inside, outside. So you can just kind of go after the best player. That's nice to have.
Yeah. Yeah. Watkins would be – I'm really intrigued by Watkins because I think he could – he's kind of like – let me – I don't have his numbers in front of me, and I apologize for that. But I believe he's former Eagle Jalen Watkins' half-brother, right?
Yeah.
And Quez Watkins' cousin, Danny Watkins' nephew. No. Sammy's last big year. I mean, it's been a while since he's had a big year. I mean, but you know, I mean, if you get 700 yards out of him, 45 catches for 700 yards. I mean, you don't need him to be a Pro Bowl or 1,000-yard receiver. Just, a functional guy who can catch the frickin' football, which they didn't have last year.
There are some names on here that scare me a little bit. T.Y. Hilton, if he wants to keep playing, that's where the familiarity kind of worries me. Like, he can't stay healthy. And you would hate to see them throw out some money for a guy who can't stay on the field.
Yeah.
There's guys, though. There are guys.
They are not going to sign a receiver. I think the upper limit would be 28. I just can't imagine them signing a receiver older than that. Just because I think their analytics tell them those guys are just going to start declining. They're just not worth the money. I could be wrong, but I'd be shocked if they sign an older receiver. I think Sammy Watkins might be like the upper limit. Let's see what he's.
Take a flyer on Will Fuller, bring him back to Philly. I mean, talk about a guy who can't stay healthy.
Yeah. I mean, was he Roman Catholic? I mean, he had almost 900 yards 2 years ago in his last full season.
He's really talented.
It was 11 games.
Yeah, he's supremely talented. Just can't stay on the field.
Yeah. Yeah, he hasn't played more than 11 games since his rookie year in 2016 with Houston. But
would you stay away from a guy like that, or would you take a flyer on him if the price is low enough?
Same high school as Marvin Harrison, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's available. I think for a guy like him with that kind of injury history, it would depend on the money. I certainly wouldn't do anything to jeopardize, my cap with an injury-prone guy like that. Okay. But if it's a super bargain deal, if nobody's calling and you can get him really cheap, yeah, bring in Will Fuller.
How about the rest? So these positions, we're talking about receiver, linebacker, cornerback, safety. Of those four, which ones do you think they'd be better off signing a free agent, and which ones do you think they'd be better off going in the draft?
Linebacker, safety, wide receiver,
and cornerback.
And corner. Well, good question. I think corner and wide receiver in the draft.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Even though we've kind of talked about the need for a veteran receiver?
Yeah. Yeah, because I think they need both.
Okay.
Because the veteran's not going to be – I just think they need a veteran in the room. I think they just need a veteran. I think that group needs that for this year. I'm not sure they're going to need it beyond this year. So, that's why a cheap guy who can still play a little bit and be a leader, catch 45 balls. But I want a first-round corner and a first-round receiver. And I think the guys are going to be there, I think, especially a receiver. And I know it'll be 3 years in a row, but you have to look at Rager as just that never happened. It's just
sunk cost.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it is. And you have to look at it that way. You can't not take a wide receiver who's really good, who can really help you just because you blew that pick. Can't do that. So it's so intriguing. I mean, to have 3 top 20 picks is, there's so many different ways you can go with that. And you can stay where you are at those 3 spots. You can You can trade up if say you want to just go up. Let's try to get up into the top, 8 picks. You can do that. If you want to get out of there and add some picks for, a one and something, a one next year and something else, you can do that. They have so much flexibility. And this is something Howie's really good at, is kind of playing that game on draft day and before draft day too. So I'm really curious to see how that goes. They've got to come out of this thing with some players that can help right away. But I think their odds of getting a receiver in a corner are pretty good if that's the way they go, who can help right away.
All right, so there's a few players here that the Eagles had in 2021 that are free agents. I'm going to read off the list of guys to you, and we're assuming a reasonable contract. Which one would you want to have back? Okay. Rodney McLeod, Derek Barnett, Steven Nelson, Ryan Kerrigan, Jannard Avery, Jordan Howard, Jason Kroom.
It'd be Kroomey, no doubt. No, it would be Steve Nelson. I think that makes the most sense. And I'm curious, I know he wants to get a big contract. He hasn't had that. He kind of made allusions to it during the season. So did Slay. And I think a little surprised. I haven't heard his name come up in any, in any of the conversations. We haven't really seen any rumors or whispers about him being on anybody's radar, which surprised me. I think he played pretty well last year. And I'd be fine bringing him back if his price comes down. I'd be happy to have Steve Nelson back. It doesn't have to come down as much as Barnett, but yeah. And I totally get him trying to get a long-term multi-year deal. But I'd be happy to have him back.
Yeah, I think veterans of his caliber end up getting screwed a little bit in a way, because you have people overpay for even players who were once great, hoping that they can find that again. Or they'll say, no, we want to get younger, and we just want to get younger, and we'll do it however we can. And then you have, the Steven Nelsons of the world, who have been good players. They're not great players. They're never going to be great players. But teams want to move on from that guy. Teams view him as a stopgap. And those guys just don't get paid very much. So, and honestly, the way the CBA works, it really incentivizes teams to find younger, cheaper players. So guys like Steven Nelson, who are looking for that deal, sometimes they never get it.
Yeah, and it's one of the reasons they put in that rookie or the veteran, what's it called, the veteran contract
salary benefit,
because veterans weren't getting, because their minimum was so high, teams didn't want to sign them. So now they can sign those guys, pay them more, but it doesn't all count against the cap. I think that's
only for minimum deals.
It's only for minimum deals, but it's helped some of those older guys who were really on the outside looking in. They couldn't get signed because their minimum was so high.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, I think Nelson can play. He's not a great corner, but I think as a CB2 across from Slay, I think that's a good fit. I'd be fine drafting a guy in the first round, bringing him back on another 1-year deal if he would do it. And like we said about Barnett, with each passing day, your chances of getting a guy like Nelson to come back on a 1-year deal go up. And I'm sure he's on their radar.
Yeah, he's the one for me. I agree with you. If I had to pick one of them, it would be him. All right, let's finish. Yeah,
it's kind of there's nobody else who you kind of.
Well, Rodney was the guy coming into this. I would have said yes, but with Harris back, it kind of changes my view on it.
Yeah, same here. Yep.
Deshaun Watson ends up in Cleveland. I'll be honest, I'm a little relieved he's not here. And that's nothing against the player, but I just wasn't looking forward to writing and talking about him. I don't know how you feel about it. It was just something I was just not looking forward to. And I don't think it ever got super close. So
no, I don't think it got close at all. All I know is if I were a fan, and I have a ton of relatives in Cleveland, my mom's from Cleveland, South Euclid in the eastern suburbs. And, my uncle, I mean, all his kids played college football or played high school football at Brush. One of them played against Mike Golick, and one of them coached Jason Kelsey. One of them's son coached Jason Kelsey in soccer. But anyway, I'd have a hard time rooting for him. He's an incredible talent. That's not even a conversation. I mean, I think he's top 5 quarterback. Might take him a while after missing last year, but probably won't. I mean, who would just based on talent alone, Brady, Mahomes, Rodgers, I think he's right up there. I think he's ahead of Russell Wilson. I don't know who else I'd put ahead of him. That might be it. Matt Barkley, he just re-signed with the Bills. But I'd have a hard time rooting for him. And I get that he's innocent until proven guilty. I understand that. But he's clearly – I think everything points to him being a really bad guy and doing some really awful things. And unless, these 22 women just independently of each other made these things up, I'd have a hard time rooting for the guy based on what he did. Now, a lot of teams have guys that have done things that are really awful. And, the Eagles have had guys who've done things that are really awful, and you get to know them and you see them as a 3-dimensional human being. And, certainly Michael Vick, I hated that signing when it happened, and got to know him and got to spend time with him and talk to him for long periods of time because he was always in his locker. You just go up to him anytime you wanted and talk to him about prison or, anything. And he would just open up to you, and, you get to know him and you see who he really is. And I think the last few years since he got out of jail has shown that he's a different person. But it still gives me the creeps. None of my relatives and friends who live in Cleveland they're struggling with it. I mean, and we should note that former Eagles front office exec and Andrew Berry was instrumental in bringing him in there. I just don't like it, and he'll get suspended. I guess that will probably be announced at the owners' meetings. Maybe we'll see. I would think 6 to 8 games. What do you think?
Yeah, probably 6. I don't know though. It's tough to tell.
Yeah, but it's incredible talent. I just don't like it.
Yeah, the part that made me feel kind of gross about it was like teams were fighting over him, and then the compensation, the way the Browns did it, which look, any team would have done this, but he ends up not taking a hit when he gets suspended this year because of the way they structured it. Like, you read that and you go, that feels gross. But
so what they did, the Browns gave him I think minimum base salary this year, and your fine, or not your fine, but the money that you don't get when you get suspended comes out of it's a percentage of your base salary. So they gave him a base salary and gave him all the money in bonus, and basically they did what Howie always does, for cap purposes, and they did that so the fine would be less. So, we'll see where it goes from here. And yeah, great player. We'll see what happens.
So what do you think it means for Eagles? Because I think they were at least paying attention. Maybe they weren't in the group that he met with, but they were probably in the fringe group, keeping an eye on it. We know they were keeping an eye on Russell Wilson. What do you think it means for them and Jalen Hurts going forward? Because they've been very publicly supportive of Jalen Hurts, but then in the background, they have a wandering eye a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, just the Deshaun Watson pursuit, ended Matt Ryan's, it looks like, tenure in Atlanta, ended, the Browns law, even before this happened, their quarterback wanted out. It's, we've seen up close and personal what can happen when a quarterback, takes it the wrong way. I think Jalen, of anybody, is wired in a way that, I mean, it has to bother him to some point, but I think he'll channel it into something positive where, I mean, that seems to be the way he's always done things when he hasn't been wanted. When he got benched in Alabama, Bama, as he says, Bama, he uses a positive and went to Oklahoma and played really well. I wrote this week, I don't think the door's closed on them drafting a quarterback, because when you're looking for a quarterback, you're not going to stop just because some veterans who are long shots anyway are off the market. If they get enamored of Malik Willis, for example, I don't think they would hesitate to draft him. And it doesn't mean they don't like Jalen. I think they do like him, but they're doing their due diligence, exploring somebody, looking for somebody who's better. And that's, but it's not easy to take when you're the player that they're trying to replace. But I think Jalen is wired a lot better than the previous guy.
Who's that?
Guy, he went to Indy. I don't know if you remember. He got traded again, I think, to Washington.
Okay.
A guy, we call him the guy in DC. It's not ideal. I mean, there's no doubt they're looking, and they're not going to stop now. I don't expect them to draft a quarterback, but I wouldn't be shocked.
Yeah.
And I think I was going to say, I think Willis is the one who would make sense. I think he's the only guy they would take in the first round. And I don't think that would necessarily mean Jalen Hurts isn't your quarterback, because Willis is a guy who's probably not ready anyway. So knowing the Eagles, knowing the way Howie thinks, and he really does think we're a quarterback factory. I mean, that's not just a quote. That's the way they think. That's the way he thinks. You draft Willis, Hurts is your quarterback, and then Willis plays great in the preseason, and then next year you try to trade one of them. That's if Hurts has a good year, you trade him, or you trade Will. So don't expect it, but it wouldn't shock me.
Speaking of the quarterback factory, just took a hit while we were recording this. Matt Ryan got traded to the Colts, so that was potentially a landing spot for Gardner Minshew. Off the board now.
So Colts' fifth starter in 5 years. Well, we knew somebody was going to be their fifth starter in 5 years, unless they brought Jacoby Brissett back, and he just signed with the Browns, right?
Mm-hmm.
He just signed with the Browns. The quarterback movement, I mean, it's crazy. Guys who've been – Matt Ryan's been with the Falcons for 20 years. There's just guys changing teams all over the place. Really unprecedented QB movement. It's going to be interesting. There's not a lot of – Russell Wilson had been in Seattle his whole career. I mean, Brady 2 years ago, he'd been in New England his whole career. Matt Ryan goes to Indy. Watson goes to Cleveland. Breeze retires. Roethlisberger retires. It's gonna be interesting looking at the QBs and who ends up where when the dust all settles.
Yeah. All right. You got anything else before we wrap this up?
No, Villanova in the Sweet 16. Can we talk about that for a second or no?
All right. What do you got?
Villanova's in the Sweet 16. They'll play Michigan with Phil Martelli, assistant coach, in San Antonio Thursday night at 7:30, and for a spot in the Elite Eight. That's all. They're fun to watch. Unlike another team based in the city, they play smart, disciplined. They don't take bad shots. They work the ball around. They move on offense. They defend. Die for loose balls. They're a really fun team to watch. It's just a typical Jay Wright team. They do everything the right way. It's not the most talented team he's had, although Gillespie is, incredible. But if you like basketball, it's just a pleasure to watch this team. So we'll see what happens. Michigan's an 11 seed. They lost 11 games during the year, but it's, tough matchup because they're so big. So it'll be fun Thursday night.
Is that the right way with a W?
No, that'll be with just R because he spells his name with a W, but yeah.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to mention, the Claude Giroux trade makes Brandon Graham the longest tenured athlete in the city of Philadelphia. It's pretty cool. for that guy to be the longest tenured athlete here.
Yeah, because we didn't think he'd make it out of year 3 there for a while. Yeah, that is pretty cool. Now, what happens, like, say he retires or something after next year and Fletcher's still here? How does that work? Like,
well, we'll have to convince Kelsey to come back for another year because he's been here longer than Fletcher.
I wonder when the last time they had 3 players who had been here 10 years.
Sounds like a job for you to look up.
All right, hang on a second. I'm going to look that up. Just talk for a while.
You do that. And I will say, if you enjoyed the Eagle Eye podcast, please do us a favor, rate and subscribe wherever you get your pods. If you're watching on YouTube, please click the like button and subscribe there as well. Reuben will be back later in the week to tell you if that stat holds up, if it's been a while.
I'll bet it has been.
It probably has been. All right. Thanks, everyone. Talk to you later.